Hello again and welcome to the second half of TVC Breakfast this Thursday. Back in Abuja, President Tinubu presented a 49.7 trillion naira appropriation bill to a joint session of the National Assembly on Wednesday. And this document, which is tagged, is for the 2025 fiscal year. The appropriation bill is tagged Budget of Restoration and prioritizes defense and security, as well as infrastructure, education, and health. Joke Adisa reports.
Thank you, Heavenly Father.
Another annual ritual heralding a new spending plan for Africa's most populous nation. Governors, ministers, and presidential aides are among those who accompanied President Tinubu to this budget presentation exercise. President of the Senate, Godswill Akpabio, welcomes dignitaries, including Mr. President, to the joint session. He speaks to the giant strides the current administration has recorded in the last 18 months, while acknowledging the attendant pains brought about by some of the government policies. He describes the tax bills as vital to reforming the nation's tax system, while he wants heirs of government agencies to always honor invitations from the National Assembly.
They should not see invitations as nuisance. They should know that any invitation is constitutional, and we also have constitutional powers to take further action where they refuse to appear.
President Bola Tinubu comes with high hopes as he presents the 2025 budget estimates to the Parliament. He says the 2024 budget has 14.55 trillion naira in revenue, representing 75% as of the third quarter.
Our budgetary allocation underscore this administration's strategic priorities, particularly in advancing renewable agenda and achieving its developmental objectives. I know this less traveled road has not been easy, that there have been difficulties and sacrifices. They will not be in vain, I assure you.
Mr. President describes the budget proposal as ambitious but necessary to secure the nation's future. On the proposed budget, the government targets 34.82 trillion naira in revenue to fund the budget, with 15.8 trillion naira for debt servicing. 13.08 trillion naira, or 3.89% of gross domestic product (GDP), will make up the budget deficit. The budget projects inflation to decline from 34.6% to 15%. In the budget estimates, defense and security gets 4.91 trillion naira, infrastructure 4.06 trillion naira, education 3.5 trillion naira, and health 2.48 trillion naira.
The journey of economic renewal and institutional development, which we began 18 months ago, it is not a journey of our choosing, but one we have to embark on for Nigeria to have a real chance at greatness.
The president says food security is non-negotiable. The Speaker, House of Representatives, Abbas Tajuddin, taxed the government on the need to reflect on the fiscal realities of Nigeria's economy.
As we approach 2025, we must embrace the realities before us with determination. Stabilizing prices, boosting agricultural productivity, expanding infrastructure, and investing in education, healthcare, and security.
He says the 2025 budget figure is ambitious and commendable.
The 2025 Appropriation Bill is tagged Budget of Restoration to consolidate on the gains of the current budget. And like Mr. President has said, it will impact positively on the lives of the citizens. And Nigerians say they cannot wait to see the positive impact of this fiscal document on citizens in the new year. Joke Adisa, TVC News, Abuja.
Joining us now from our Abuja studio is economist Paul Alaji. Thank you very much for joining us on TVC Breakfast. Well, what are your takeaways from President Tinubu's outing yesterday?
Thank you so very much for having me. As usual, we know that presidents every year present their subsequent year budget. President Tinubu carried out that ritual yesterday when he was at the National Assembly to present 2025 budget. Nominally, that looks like huge budget that we have never done before in our history. And I say that because in naira terms, that budget, according to reports, it was 47.9 trillion naira. Now, that budget in real sense is not too different from what we have done over the years, because in dollar terms, that budget is between $30 to $31 billion. That's the corridor with which Nigeria presented budget in the last 10 years. It's between $28 billion to $31 billion. So it's a good one that it is within that same corridor. The budget, however, has some parameters, some of which are good, some of which are messages of hope, and some of which are a bit of concern. When you look at them, the parameter of growth, the president is looking at above 3%. Yes, if the economy, if we don't rebase in 2025, we might even have growth go beyond 3%. We might see at some point 4% GDP growth rate. But if we rebase the economy, then the average growth rate will be between above 1% to 2% once we rebase the economy. So it depends on the decision of authority whether we want to rebase or not. If we don't rebase, then you might see something above 3% GDP growth rate in 2025. Inflation. The president is hoping that we're going to have 15% inflationary pressure next year. I doubt that so very much because even this year, the government is expected inflation to be between 21 to 26%. What we are ending the year with, as of November, was 34.6%. The policy environment has not changed. So it's going to be practically difficult to see inflation turn from 34.6% now to 15%. Again, the president is looking at an exchange rate at 1,500. I saw MTF, it was 1,400. Now, if the policy environment remains the same, what econometrics is projecting as of today, using different application, is between 1,800 to 2,200. So, but if policy environment change, we might get as low as 1,300 to 1,500, depending on the policy environment. But if we sustain the current policy environment, then I'm sorry, we might not get up to that. The president projected per barrel crude a day, that's our oil production in terms of crude, his projection was 2.06 million barrels a day. That's what the president has projected. It's not too very different from what he did in 2024, but Bureau statistics reveal for the current year 2024 that in the first quarter, our average oil production, the first and second quarter, our average oil production was less than 1.5 million. Towards the third quarter, we saw a surge of some sort that moved that to about 1.7 million barrels a day. And now we are seeing it inching towards 1.8 million. It's still a bit far off from the target. So we need to do more to providing security, which I believe the president and the security agencies will do. By the way, we have seen some level of improvement from security agencies. That is perhaps why we have seen some movement, upward movement, from 1,400 reported in second quarter to about 1.4 million in second quarter, now to about 1.7 million in the more recent data. So we have seen that upward movement. But can we sustain it to improve what comes in oil revenue into that, because it's a parameter in that budget. Now, when you also look at government expectation in terms of what Nigeria will be doing, talk about growth, talk about performances, the president has said, well, all this growth, even though expenditure is high, we are going to ensure that we tie it with growth. But you see, things of interest here will be what the president has allocated for infrastructure, what he has allocated for security, what he has allocated for health, what he has allocated for education. Why infrastructure and security claim 4 trillion naira, and you go to education and health, 33 trillion naira. And that amount appears to be, very huge amount, fantastic, they are. And also, but when you look at what debt service is claiming, then you see that all of the gains we have mentioned in infrastructure, in health, and what we have mentioned in education, and what we have mentioned in infrastructure, we also have almost 13 trillion in debt service. So when you put all of this together, you see that, yes, we need to take some key decisions to put more investment in that capital expenditure.
All right, Mr. Alaje, we'll continue our conversation when we return from
the champions.
Right, we're still analyzing the budget presentation by the president for the year 2025. Of course, the president had this very crucial outing customarily at the National Assembly on Wednesday. We've been speaking with Paul Alaje, and he has, opened up. He has given us some of his concerns on the indices, the indicators, as revealed by the president, the breakdown of who gets what. And, of course, Mr. Alaje has been sharing his concerns with us.
Yes, of course, quite a lot of concern. But there's one I need to talk about now, and that's in terms of revenue generation, especially with this budget that the president has presented. Now, my question is, how does this proposed oil price target of $75 per barrel and production target of 2.06 million barrels per day impact on the budget revenues projection? And let's also talk about the potential risk of not meeting these targets.
First of all, when you look at revenue projection, it's quite huge. But I think and I believe that is why the executive sends the tax reform to the assembly first. You see, if we don't work on tax reform very quickly, it might be really very challenging for us to meet those revenue targets as stated. And when you look at the energy with which the executive has given to tax reform, you know that it can only be that the budget is highly dependent on it. You saw a major surge from the revenue we did this year, we are doing currently, to what we expected to do. It is because government is really expecting that more revenue will be coming as a result of the adjustment in reform that will happen in 2025. But as I speak, I know that the National Assembly have really not taken that forward. My concern as tax reform, I've mentioned it, and I've mentioned a lot of benefits that are contained in the tax reform. Areas where we need to make adjustment, I've also mentioned it. And sections that are a bit afraid or concerned about tax reform, I've also mentioned that they may not necessarily have things to be bothered about. I've also advised the committee what is to be done such that this tax reform can scale through the National Assembly and go back to the president for him to put his signature on it. I strongly believe that with the tax reform, and if necessary adjustment is made to the-reform, 1, 2, with the projection we have in oil revenue, I strongly believe that we will meet our revenue target. Note that the current leadership of FIRS has really improved in terms of revenue under the current chairman of FIRS. So when you look at what FIRS has done, and you look at their percentage growth, add that to the possible improvement in tax reform and the projected oil revenue, clearly we will meet the revenue target. And if we don't, I'm sure we'll do clearly above 80%. Now, but where we may have challenge is if those who are taking away our crude, they continue to have a free day, and if we throw away the baby and the bathwater in tax reform, and if FIRS is not allowed to also deepen their strength and ongoing work, then we all have a big headache on our head. And I don't know if paracetamol will be enough to take that off.
All right, and let's also look at, the president alluding, and he has also been taking up on that, the aspect where he acknowledges that this is a bold document, this is also ambitious, especially when you look at what infrastructure will be getting. Two key projects, you could call them poster projects of the Tinubu administration, the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Project. We're also seeing the Badagry-Sokoto Highway Project, which is also, on board, so to speak. What are your thoughts regarding these two projects and what the deliverables are from them?
Well, when you talk about very ambitious budget, I really doubt. I don't think this is ambitious, and I don't think what we are investing in infrastructure is that big. Honestly, I speak not as just a commentator. I'm speaking to you now as an economist. Economics is not about absolutism. Economics is about relativism. When you look at what South Africa is investing, what Egypt is investing, and you come back to what we are investing, you see that it's very meager, very, very small. Our infrastructural need is an average of $100 billion. And we need to do that for the next 10 to 15 years for the impact to be felt. In which area? Energy, power. 2, roads. 3, rails. And so many others. We have education, health. You know, we need to have dependable health center. I mean, primary, secondary, and so on. But when you convert these 4 trillion naira into dollars and ask, how much in dollar terms are we investing? I doubt if that will be up to 2.5 billion. I don't know, maybe $3 billion. Compare that to what we need. Again, look at the overall budget. What percentage of our overall budget are we voting to education? So while the amount looks big, in naira terms, recall that the naira you have in your pocket today is not the same as naira you have in your pocket 2 years ago. 2 years ago, 1 naira commands equivalent of 700 naira command $1. Today, you will need to look for ×2 of that money and more before you can command $1. We live in a global economy. We don't live in just...
Right, Mr. Alaje, kindly hold that thought. We're still on this point of, you know, what you've already said as much, that, okay, we have much more needs than what we are getting, than what the president says, you know, infrastructure will get. But does the country have the means to pump more money into this project? Can we also balance, can you also balance your thoughts with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. That's a very good question. I don't actually expect government to put all of this money alone, by government alone, in infrastructure. What I think the president and his team can do is, how do we deliberately encourage private sector investment in infrastructure, coordinated and arranged. In this country, there have been times where we are talking about sports, when Nigerian government would organize private sector to invest in sports. And we saw what happens. The same thing. Can we deliberately attract organized private sector to invest in this project? Look at what happened between, is it Apapa-Oshodi Expressway? That road, I go to Lagos a lot. That road remains one of the best in recent history in Lagos, constructed by Dangote. What can we do? We don't need to have that large span of road. Can we have the one that is 20 kilometers, 10 kilometers, 5 kilometers, which organized private sector can help? Do I think Nigerian government has all the money to invest in infrastructure within 1, 2, or 4 years or 8 years of the administration? No, that's not what I'm saying. I will not be fair on the administration. I will not be fair. I am saying the president can set up a team to deliberately attract private sector to invest in infrastructure. So what he wants to do, you know, what we have done over the years is that the leaders come, our presidents come, they announce 1 trillion naira, 2 trillion naira, 3 trillion, now 4 trillion naira. And they are doing just so much to ensure that their work show. But because demand for the road is so much, demand for rail is so much, demand for infrastructure is so much, it doesn't show at the end of the day. So we now say, oh, the leaders have not done anything. Across political party, the previous party and the current party, we feel, oh, these leaders have spent all our money, they have not done anything. Because what is required is just so much. And that is why I've encouraged that we need to have a national development plan, not just to executive to ask committee to look at it. No. This development plan must have legislation of National Assembly. Why? Whosoever becomes the president will not move away from it. So if President Tinubu set up a team to look at a national development plan, out of which you now have national infrastructural plan, national agricultural plan, national development. So you can have different plans from this. And it goes to the National Assembly and it's passed into law. So whosoever is coming to office will not say, oh, I don't like the face of the first president. President Tinubu is from this session. President Buhari is from that session. The person knows he must continue. Certain percentage of the project must continue. That is when the world will take us seriously. Check countries that have developed significantly. They all have national development plan. And percentage of this budget that we are passing today must go to development plan, and we are able to trace the money. We cannot say the money got missing. It's not possible. Because it's now legislation that even necessitates the president or whatever leader to vote money to those projects. So for me, when I understand that we have done 4 trillion naira this year, I'm not saying 1 year do all the projects. No, please don't get me wrong. I'm saying from that national development plan, what proportion will come from private sector? How are we going to get it? That will even reduce our often going to the market to raise money, either through green bond or through federal government, FNGM bond, and so on and so forth. And you will see that there will be a major traceable progress, irrespective of who is leading Nigeria per time.
Right.
All right, Mr. Paul Alaje, we thank you very much. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this conversation, but we definitely hope to connect with you again to speak about this and other pertinent issues. Many thanks again.
Thank you so much.